So imagine for a second that you've played the game exactly how you were told to play it.
Right.
You followed all the rules.
Yeah.
You got the degree, you grinded for the career, you bought the house.
You provided for the family. You did exactly what society told you a quote-unquote good man does.
Exactly. And then one morning you wake up and it is just all gone.
Yeah.
The house, not yours anymore. The kids, you see them maybe every other weekend if you're lucky. And your paycheck is garnished before it even hits your bank account.
It sounds like a dystopian nightmare scenario, honestly. But the reality is, for millions of men, this isn't a bad dream. It's just Tuesday.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking today on this deep dive.
Yeah, it's a heavy one.
It is. We are looking at a source today that argues this isn't just bad luck. It isn't just a broken system or, a few bad apples in the judiciary. The argument here is that this is a trap.
A deliberate trap.
Right. A deliberate, engineered financial and legal trap designed to extract wealth from men.
So today we're doing a deep dive into an ebook called 50-50 Divorce, more like 0-100, under unconstitutional female supremacist family law by Conrad Riker.
It is quite a title.
It really is. And let me tell you, Riker does not pull a single punch in this book.
No, he doesn't. The title alone tells you exactly where his argument stands. But before we get into the gears of this machine, and we are going to get highly technical today, I want to speak directly to you, the listener, for a second.
Definitely.
If you're listening to this and you felt like something in the world has just snapped, or if you feel like the game is rigged against you and you can't quite figure out the rules, you need to stop what you're doing and like and subscribe to this deep dive right now.
Seriously. Riker frames his work basically as a survival manual for men.
Yeah.
If you're part of the men's rights advocate community, or you consider yourself a red-pilled man trying to navigate the manosphere, this book is specifically aimed at you.
It is. And if what we talk about today resonates with you, you need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Play Books immediately and buy this book.
It is ultra long, it's dense, it's incisive, it frames the history of our institutions in a way you have probably never heard before.
Specifically, he argues about understanding the history of our institutions before they were, as he puts it, captured by feminists and Marxists.
Right. Yeah.
So let's get into the core of it. We've got our source, we've got our mission. We're going to impartially look at Riker's incredibly provocative thesis. He's not just saying divorce is unfair.
No.
He's arguing that our legal, educational, and corporate institutions have been entirely captured.
Yeah.
But the part that really stood out to me was his take on the family court system.
Because the common complaint you always hear is that the system is broken, right?
Right.
People say the system is just broken.
Right.
But Riker says no, it is not broken. It is functioning exactly as it was designed to function.
Designed to dispossess men.
Exactly. And to explain this, he introduces a metaphor that is going to be uncomfortable for some people, but it is entirely central to his argument. He calls it the marriage plantation.
Man, that is a heavy metaphor. What does he actually mean by that in a legal context?
Well, he's arguing that marriage in the modern Western legal context has mutated. He says it is no longer a partnership in the traditional sense.
Oh.
He argues it has become a form of legal enslavement or indentured labor. The premise he lays out is that once you sign that marriage license, you are essentially signing a blank check to the state and to your spouse. You cease to be a sovereign individual and you become an asset.
An asset to be harvested.
Yes, harvested is the word.
So harvested implies a transfer of resources. Does he bring the data to back that up? Because obviously that is a massive claim to make.
He does. He starts with alimony, and the numbers he pulls are stark. Riker highlights that in the United States, 98% of alimony recipients are women.
98%.
Yes. Now, if you pause on that, if the law were truly gender neutral like it claims to be, you would expect some variance.
Sure, maybe a 60-40 split. Or even 70-30.
Right. But 98%. Riker argues that specific statistic proves there is a systemic transfer of wealth in one direction.
It's almost a statistical impossibility without some kind of bias built in.
Exactly.
But I want to talk about the mechanism here. I was reading his notes on lifestyle maintenance. This part completely blew my mind because it seems to defy basic economic logic.
Oh, it completely defies logic. But it is standard legal practice. Riker calls it a scam.
How does it work?
The principle is that the lifestyle established during the marriage must be maintained for the ex-wife, regardless of the man's current financial reality or the fact that the household has now split in two.
So even though you are now having to support two households on the exact same income you had before, the standard of living for her isn't allowed to drop.
Precisely. And Riker details the case of Dr. Gregory Matthews to show just how extreme this gets. Dr. Matthews is a urologist,
Yeah.
very high earner.
Right.
Over the years, he paid over $1 million in support.
$1 million. Just in support.
Yes. And here is the kicker with this case. His ex-wife eventually moved in with a new partner, a yoga instructor.
Okay, so logic would dictate that her living expenses are now cut in half, right?
Yeah.
She has a new partner contributing to the household.
You would think so. But when Dr. Matthews went back to court to ask them to lower his payments, the court refused.
Because of the lifestyle maintenance.
Yes, because her specific high-end lifestyle, which was funded by the doctor's 80-hour work weeks, had to be preserved. The court didn't care about her actual needs, they cared about maintaining her status.
Wow.
Riker argues this literally turns men into walking ATMs. You aren't a person in the eyes of the court, you are a utility provider.
It's explicitly separating the earner from the fruit of his labor. There's another case in the book that felt even more egregious to me. Neil Wolgan.
Oh, that one is just heartbreaking. Neil Wolgan was 70 years old, married for 40 years.
40 years.
His wife admits to cheating on social media. She actually admits to the affair publicly, and then she files for divorce.
Wait, so she breaks the vows, admits it publicly, and initiates the split.
Correct. And the court orders this 70-year-old man to pay $15,000 a month.
That's insane. He's retirement age.
He should be resting. But instead, according to Riker's framing, he is forced to keep grinding to fund the lifestyle of the person who just betrayed him.
And that brings us to the legal mechanism that makes all of this possible. We have to talk about no-salt divorce. Because most people just think of this as a modern convenience. You know, you don't have to prove abuse or adultery to leave a bad marriage.
Right, but Roker has a very different take on it. He doesn't call it liberation at all. He calls it a corporate raid.
A corporate raid?
Yeah. If you think about marriage as a business contract, no-fault divorce allows one partner to break the contract unilaterally, without cause, and walk away with half the assets plus a guaranteed revenue stream.
And the statistics he brings up show exactly who is initiating these raids.
Women initiate roughly 69% of divorces. Riker's point is that in literally any other business sector, the person breaking the contract pays penalties.
Right, if I break my apartment lease, I pay a fee.
If I break a vendor contract, I get sued. But in family court, Riker argues, the person breaking the contract gets rewarded with cash and prizes. It just completely removes all accountability.
So the money is one side of the coin. That's the plantation aspect, the labor extraction. But the other side, and frankly the darker side of his argument, is what Riker calls custody castration.
Yeah, this is where the metaphor shifts from financial extraction to emotional erasure. We hear a lot about shared parenting in the media, but Riker pulls up the census data. 80.4% of custodial parents are mothers. That is an 80-20 split.
But wait, the courts always talk about the best interest of the child. That's the golden rule, right?
Yeah.
Every judge says that.
And Riker argues that best interest of the child is actually just a legal code word for maternal preference. He calls it a vagueness doctrine. Because best interest is totally subjective, it allows judges to bypass objective facts and just rely on their own bias.
And this connects directly to his point about the feminist judiciary. He calls it a sorority with gavels, which is quite an image.
It is a strong image, but he's looking at the raw demographics. He points out that over 70% of family court judges are women. He argues this creates an in-group bias where female judges inherently sympathize with mothers and they view fathers as secondary or even suspect.
And that bias isn't just theoretical. It has real-world consequences in these courts. We have to talk about the James Holmes story from the book. I read this section 3 times because I honestly couldn't believe it was real.
It's a prime example of what Riker calls the erasure of fathers. So James Holmes was in a bitter custody battle. He managed to get a recording, hard, objective evidence of his ex-wife whispering to their 6-year-old child, "Daddy's a monster."
Which is textbook parental alienation. It's psychological abuse of a child.
Absolutely. But when he played this recording for the court, what do you think happened?
Nothing.
Nothing. They completely ignored it. And Riker contrasts this. He says, imagine if a father had been recorded whispering, "Mommy is a monster," to a 6-year-old.
He'd lose visitation immediately. He'd be labeled controlling or abusive right on the spot.
Exactly. But when the mother does it, the system frames it as her being protective. It illustrates this massive double standard where fathers who fight to see their kids are labeled litigious, while mothers who block access are seen as nurturing.
It's a rigged game. And speaking of rigged, we need to circle back to the money again, but specifically regarding the kids. Child support. Riker doesn't mince words here at all. He calls it racketeering.
He views it entirely as a revenue stream for the state. This is a technical point that I think a lot of people miss. Riker points out that under Title 4V of the Social Security Act, states receive federal bonuses for child support enforcement.
Wait, so the state government actually makes money based on how much child support they collect from fathers?
Yes, the more they collect, the more federal funding they get. So his argument is that the system is financially incentivized to maximize collections. Not to be fair, the judge isn't a neutral arbiter. They are an agent of a system that needs that revenue.
That is wild.
And this leads to what Riker calls the legalization of deception, specifically regarding paternity fraud.
Now, this is the stuff that sounds like a daytime soap opera until you realize it is actual case law. Paternity fraud essentially means a man paying child support for a child that isn't biologically his.
And it is terrifyingly real. Riker cites the case of Robert Lopez down in Texas. He paid $89,000 in support for children that DNA testing proved were not his.
Not his kids. And the court knew this. They saw the DNA test.
The court fully knew. But the judge ruled he had assumed the risk and ordered him to keep paying. Biology didn't matter. The truth didn't matter. Only the payment mattered.
That phrase, assume the risk, it's chilling. It sounds like something you sign on a skydiving waiver, not when you get married.
And the consequences of not paying, even if the kid isn't yours, are severe. This is where we need to explain the Bradley Amendment.
Right. This is a crucial piece of legislation in Riker's book. What exactly is the Bradley Amendment?
The Bradley Amendment is a federal law that forbids the forgiving of child support debt. Riker identifies this as the literal lock on the trap. Child support debt cannot be discharged in bankruptcy, ever. It is, in Riker's terms, a life sentence.
So if I gamble away $1 million, or I run a business into the ground, I can declare Chapter 7 bankruptcy and basically get a fresh start.
Yes. You can walk away from credit card debt, mortgage debt, almost anything. But if you fall behind on child support, even for kids that aren't biologically yours, or kids you aren't legally allowed to see, you carry that debt forever.
Wow.
And in many cases, like the case of Robert Mansour, who was jailed for 17 months, it leads directly to incarceration. Riker argues we effectively have debtors' prisons for men.
So let's just recap the architecture of Riker's argument here. You have a system that takes your assets via no-fault divorce, takes your children via biased custody laws, and then locks you up if you can't pay for the privilege of losing them. It feels like a coordinated attack.
Riker argues it absolutely is coordinated, but he goes even broader than just the court system. He talks about a war on masculinity that starts way before marriage. He traces this back to the education system and the broader cultural narrative.
He talks a lot about toxic masculinity. We hear this phrase everywhere now.
Right. And Riker argues that the term toxic masculinity is just weaponized shame. It's a tool used to control men by labeling their natural instincts, things like competitiveness, stoicism, aggression, as a pathology. He makes a really sharp point. We hear about toxic masculinity constantly, but we never hear about toxic femininity.
Which implies that only one gender is inherently defective.
Exactly. And he argues this starts in schools which have become actively hostile to boys. He cites the Pop-Tart gun incident.
Oh, I remember this headline. This was the 6-year-old in Florida.
Yes. A 6-year-old boy bites a breakfast pastry into a shape that vaguely resembles a gun, says bang, and gets suspended from school. Riker uses this to show how schools pathologize normal boyhood behavior. They treat high energy and rough play as defective, and they medicate boys into compliance because they don't behave like girls.
And then when these boys grow up, they face what Riker calls the vulnerability trap. This is something I think a lot of guys struggle with today. Society constantly tells you, open up, be vulnerable, share your feelings. But Riker says, don't do it.
He calls it a massive double bind. Men are told to be vulnerable, but Riker argues that when they actually are, when they show fear or weakness or they cry, they are punished for it.
Right.
In the dating market, they get the ick from women. In the courtroom, it's used as evidence of emotional instability. Riker's advice is strict stoicism because he believes the demand for male vulnerability is just a trap to gather ammo to use against them later.
He connects this to biology, too. He brings up Bateman's principle.
Mm-hmm.
We should probably define that for the listener.
Right. Bateman's principle is a concept from evolutionary biology. Roughly speaking, it states that the sex which invests more in producing offspring, which is usually the female, becomes a limiting resource over which the other sex competes. Riker connects this directly to hypergamy.
Alpha fucks, beta bucks.
That is the shorthand, yes. Riker calls this the evolutionary betrayal. He argues that modern feminism tries to rewrite human nature, pretending men and women are exactly the same. But biology always wins out.
Women are evolutionarily wired to seek status and resources.
According to Riker, yes. And he argues the legal system is just a modern, state-enforced way to ensure that resource extraction happens, even if the relationship entirely fails.
So if the game is rigged, if the courts are a trap, and society is hostile to your very nature, what do? Riker doesn't just leave the reader in despair. He spends a lot of time talking about the rise of the single man.
He discusses the MGTOW movement, men going their own way. But Riker frames this not as bitterness or misogyny, but as a rational economic calculation. He says, if you know the casino is rigged against you, the only winning move is not to play.
He calls it the bachelor's dividend.
Yes. He cites data suggesting single men actually accumulate more wealth and live longer than divorced men. By opting out of marriage, men are hedging against a system that is designed to strip them of assets.
It's basically a strike, a marriage strike.
Precisely. And he looks at the sexual marketplace today, dating apps, modern hookup culture, and he sees it as an auction where most men are just invisible utilities. He argues if you aren't in the top 1%, you are essentially just paying for dinner.
And meanwhile, male spaces are under siege. It seems like men have nowhere to go to even talk about these issues.
That's a key part of the cultural isolation he outlines. Riker points out the blatant double standard. Women get Shea Fund, The Wing, all these female-only spaces that are heavily funded by corporations and the state. But look at male spaces. The Boy Scouts, forced to integrate. Fraternities, constantly under attack or dismantled.
Right.
Riker argues there is a concerted cultural effort to dismantle any space where men can bond and organize because isolated men are simply easier to control.
Man, when you stack it all up like that chronologically, the financial ruin, the custody loss, the cultural shaming, the destruction of male spaces, it really does look like a system working exactly as designed.
That is the red pill moment Riker wants the reader to have. He wants you to see the Matrix for what it is. He argues that you aren't crazy for feeling like the world lied to you about fairness. You were promised a partnership, but you were sold a liability.
It's a sobering reality check. Riker basically says, look, you go from the financial ruin of divorce to the total cultural erasure of fatherhood. This is not an accident.
And he leaves us with a very provocative final thought at the end of the book, the privilege inversion principle.
I really wanted to get to this part.
We are constantly told in society that men are privileged. We hear it in ads, in movies, in corporate HR training. But Riker asks a very simple question. If men are so privileged, why are they the vast majority of the homeless? Why do they make up the vast majority of suicide victims? Why are men 92% of workplace fatalities?
That is the question that keeps you up at night. If you are supposedly the oppressor, why are you the one dying in the ditch?
Riker's answer is that male privilege is a myth used to justify male disposability. He argues we are useful only as long as we can produce. And when we stop producing or when we complain about the system, we are just discarded.
This has been an incredibly intense deep dive. This isn't easy stuff to hear, but it's necessary. If this deep dive sparked something in you, if you're nodding along thinking, finally someone said it out loud, you need to take action.
Absolutely. Do not just listen to this and move on with your day. You need to follow Conrad Riker. Go to Substack right now and follow @ConradRiker. He is putting out the kind of analysis you are simply not going to find in the mainstream media.
And seriously, you need to buy the book. 50-50 Divorce. Check Amazon Kindle. Check Google Playbooks. Get it today. Riker frames it as arming yourself with the truth. You wouldn't go into battle without a weapon. Don't go into the family court system or even a marriage without this information.
It's about survival. Knowledge is the only leverage you have left in a system like this.
That's it for this deep dive. Like and subscribe if you want more truth bombs like this. We will catch you on the next one. Stay sharp out there.
And stay free.